Hi guys, and welcome to the second edition of the Design Edge Learning Series. Today I want to talk to you briefly about Cartesian coordinates, how they're used in entering locations in Design Edge, and then also I think it's important that this early on we look at what the software is asking us to do when we move things, copy things, mirror things. There are coordinates or points that it asks for, and sometimes even though you know how to move something, there are tips and tricks that can go with the coordinate system that will possibly help you come up with a better way to use these commands and do things in drawings or dimension part drawings to make your life easier. So let's dig right. To start with, the coordinate system that Design Edge and most other CAD systems use is the Cartesian coordinate system. And when René Descartes, the philosopher mathematician, came up with it, it was in two planes, x and y, and we've since added the third, the z-axis, and of course that one's in the third dimension, standing up from the paper off the page. So Mr. Descartes, so these are Cartesian coordinates. He's also the father of the Cartesian theory, which is the trademark theory of religion, whereas he says that if I inherently think that there is a higher power that created me, then that is evidence that that higher power exists. So I'll leave you to sort all that out. But he is a 16th century guy, so this is some old stuff. If you look at his system, then you see that there are four quadrants. Top right is the first quadrant, rotating counterclockwise to the left, and that's kind of a handy piece of information to know when you start using the rotate feature in Design Edge. You'll find that angles, if they have a zero reference, if they just are naturally in an absolute number, then you'll find that if you rotate something 90 degrees, it rotates 90 degrees to the left. Okay, so that is the direction is counterclockwise, and the home position is 3 o'clock, so due east. But as you move up in the along the axes, then the numbers get larger. So starting from the center, 0, 0, it would go up and it would move in the positive direction. If you went down, it would go negative. Once you pass 0, 0, then the numbers become negative. So the same thing applies on the x-axis. Moving to the right is positive, to the left is negative. This is basic stuff, but it is exactly how the software processes every click that you make. Comes back to this system. So if you look at the drawing of your table, you'll see that, assuming you have the table edges on and the grid on so that you can see it, you'll see that in the bottom left-hand corner is the software's 0, 0. That's its origin. And so if you were to take this example and move it, you'd see that this is what it looks like. Okay, so everything that you design is in the positive x and positive y. But in Design Edge, you can draw off the page by a very large margin, and so anytime you come out here, now you're in negative territory. Okay, up here is going to be positive in the y but negative in the x. So hopefully, put that out here, that will make some sense while we dive into using and typing in these numbers. So everything in Design Edge requires a coordinate, because unlike a raster image where you draw a circle and it turns the pixels in the circle on, and the pixels that aren't in the circle are just off. This requires the drawing to have a mathematical value. So if I have a circle that I want to draw, it is made up of individual nodes and arcs that make it, in fact, be round. And let me show you kind of what I mean by that. So if I go to my settings and I tell the arc resolution to be 6, okay, in a 1-inch circle, that means to be that there are 6 nodes in that circle that define it in a 1-inch circle. So I'll tell it okay, I'll push Q to draw a circle, I'll push 1 to draw a 1-inch circle and hit enter. And I'll place that down. Now we zoom in and look. Now it's telling me there are 5 nodes. I told this to draw a circle. I wound up with a path that's 5 nodes, not 6. So when you see when I set my arc resolution down to 6, that's a circle. I mean, it's still a shape that comprises 360 degrees. But if I scale that up, knowing it's still a circle, now I have a very crude circle. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides. And if I scale it up even farther, I'm going to have even more sides. And so this is how the mathematics is used to produce an image. So if I set my arc resolution up where it needs to be, 100 is 99% of the time what I use. Sometimes when I get down into tiny stuff for the laser, I'll kick it up to 1,000. So you see it says, do you want to regenerate this arc? Because it's a mathematical arc that made that circle. If I say yes, then now I have a circle. So hopefully that helps you to see that now I have 169 nodes in this circle based on its size. If I were to draw a circle now that's 1 inch, then there I am, and so I'm at 101. So that's what your arc resolution does, and that is also a brief explanation of how the program, when I draw a line or a circle, it plots each of these points, and each of those points has an address in the Cartesian coordinate system. If my spot's address is 1, 1, and I click close to it to draw a line from it at 1.001, 1, those two things are not equal. So in Paint, it'd look pretty, I would print it. In Metal and CAD, those lines wouldn't connect and I'd have a problem. So let's never mind the boring stuff, and let's look a little bit at how to use Design Edge and integrate that knowledge of the tools that we have to draw with the numbers that the software asks for. So there's tons of tools, but let's start with just a basic line. And the very first thing it wants to know is, what's the first point of the line? So always when you pick a tool or you want to do something, look down in this bottom left-hand corner where the software is going to ask you for some information. And so that is what you can use to determine where you want to click or what you want to type. So if I want the first point of this line, the anchor point, to be over to the right 4 and up 3 from the table corner at 0, 0, over 4, up 3, then that's, count my grid points that I have set to an inch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it should be about there. And up 3, 1, 2, 3, so about there. And you can see that my lines aren't straight, and they're not on that point. The reason is I didn't use any snaps, and I just clicked on the screen. So if I'm doing a dimensioned part, or if I'm using spacing in my art and I need it to be exact, this isn't it. So let's try again, and let's say I want to find that point. Then I'm going to hit L for line, the first point of my line, and I'm going to type the coordinates. So I'm going to count over what I wanted to do. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, 2, 3 up. So 4 to the right of this origin, because when you enter an absolute coordinate, it's from this origin of the table corner, 4, comma, 3. And when I hit enter, you'll see that the first point of my line anchors to that point that we were talking about. Another way to get that is to use G for grid snap when it asks for that. But we already covered the basics of snaps, and we'll go into depth with those later. So if you look down in the corner, now it's asking us for the next point of the line. You can click if you're doing artwork, you can line it up with something. If you're doing a part, then you can enter the exact dimension that you want. So if I wanted from this point to have a vertical line going up 4 inches, then 1, 2, 3, 4 would be right up here. I could grid snap to that because it's even. If it were not even, then it would be more difficult, so we'd need to find what we're doing. From here, when you're working your way around a dimensioned part and entering it, you can start with squares and circles and where they fit, or you can actually, if you have all the dimensions, just start at a corner and draw it around, because you don't have to enter absolute coordinates. You can enter relative coordinates. So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4 inches up would be over 4 and up 7, right? So 1, 2, 3 to our spot, and then 3 plus 4 is 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to do all that math, you can. You can say, I want to enter over 4 and up 7. And I would get to that point. But nobody wants to do all that math. So what I want to do is to tell it that I'm going to enter a relative coordinate. And relative means that your new coordinates are relative to your anchor point, or to your reference point that you've made in the first click of your function. So the process we're doing is drawing a line. We've entered our first point with an absolute coordinate, so we know where we're starting. And now we want to make the next point be 3 inches above that first point. So we'll put an @ sign, which is shifting the number 2. And from this point, now what that means is, let's pretend like this origin down here is moved to this first point of our line. So slide our crosshairs up, and so what we want to do to go vertically 4 inches is to say at first our horizontal movement in X, and that movement in the X plane is 0 because I want to go straight up, comma 4 to go straight up, and there's our vertical line. And I'm going to show you just briefly something besides straight up and down that might illustrate this a little better. And let's say now when I do at again, so my new reference point is still the first point of the line I'm drawing, which is the last point. So from there, if I've got to move on my dimension part over 2 inches and up 3 inches, then I would be at 2 and move to the right 2, comma, up 3, so 3, and hit enter. So now I move to the right 2 and up 3. And you're going to do the same thing with negative numbers. If I wanted to go negative 3 inches from here, so 3 inches to the left, and then comma 0, you can see that takes you back in the left direction, and obviously negative in the second dimension, in the y dimension, moves you down. So hopefully that helps a little bit with those coordinate entries and makes a little more sense for those that wondered what everybody was talking about with coordinates. Let's look ever so briefly at entering angles. So I'm going to draw a straight line, use grid snaps to get that line straight. And so the next point of my line needs to be a 60-degree angle, and that would be, remember, 60 from the 3 o'clock position. So you need to keep that in mind, that you're entering an absolute with an angle. And to enter an angle, you use the less than sign. And so we'll say 60 degrees, comma. The next entry when you use angle is distance. So the next point is at a 60-degree angle, this many inches from the first point of my line. So let's say 3. So I'm going to have a 60-degree line, 3 inches long, and hit enter. So there's my line, 60. And if I do a line here, then I should be able to show you that that's a 60-degree angle from that 3 o'clock position. Okay? So remember that when you're entering your angles, that it is always from that origin to the right, turning counterclockwise around your coordinates, that 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's look a little bit at reference points. So when I want to move something, so let's say I have this circle and I want to move it. If I'm going to take this circle and I want the center of this circle to be on the corner of this square, then when I highlight it to move something and then hit M for move, it wants to know move from point. Well, since I want to move the circle from its center and put its center specifically somewhere, then I need to push C for center snap, or pick it with my right mouse or with my mouse wheel and pick center snap. And then remember, to center snap, you need to click on the shape, not in the center. And so now you can see that as I move that circle around, the reference point is the center. And then I can pick a node point snap, and I can go directly to this corner, and it'll put the corner of it right in the center of the circle. Okay, so here is the tip that I want to give you. So let's say that we have something a little more complex. So let's say I've got this text and it's going to fit in this circle, so I'm going to move. And when I just move stuff roughly, I don't care where I move it from. Okay, I'm just going to click and move it around so I can get it to fit. So let me scale that down. All right, so let's say that I want to draw some circles inside of this and connect them before I put this Grandpa Ted back in the middle. But I have Grandpa Ted exactly where I want him. So I need a reference point. Now I can find a reference point in my drawing. I can use the quadrant of the circle. I can use a lot of different things. But I find that it's easiest to just draw myself a circle somewhere off out of the way to use as a reference. And so I'm going to select Grandpa Ted. I'm going to hold down Control, which lets me add to my selection. So I hold down Control and click on my new little circle that I drew up here. And I'm going to hit C for copy. And I'm going to just pick anywhere I want and move that over here out of the way. Then I'm going to delete Grandpa Ted out of my circle. Now I can offset this circle. Let me just make some pretty things here. Okay, and then I'm going to draw a line from this quadrant to this quadrant, and a line from this quadrant to this quadrant, and I'm going to offset those lines 1 inch each direction. I'm going to hold Control and let off, and then Control and let off. And now what I've done is just tied all those circles together. Now remember, if Grandpa Ted had been in the middle of all of this, my lines would be all through the middle of that text. And so I don't want that. What I want to do now is come through and use my trim tool to delete all of that out. And I can go through now easily and get rid of the in-between pieces. okay, of this drawing without worrying about that text being in my way. So I'll clean these up. Okay, so I have all of that trimmed out. I'm going to select it all and hit J for join or link that back together. And now I have taken my shape and put a lot of intricate details in it. And I want to look over here at Grandpa Ted. So if I want to put that, I'm going to just show you. If I want to put that right there, so all of this stuff is going to be in the way. So maybe I want to offset a path around that and fix up something that will hold that text in place when I put it in there. So let's look over here at what we can do. I can offset 1/4 of an inch, and I can hold Control to copy. I can do each of these letters. Now I'll have a box around it, but I have another hot mess. My boxes overlap and I need to connect them together. So let me just grab all of this. Keeping my reference circle, I'll copy it down here. So now I have all of this. I'm going to delete my offset paths and get those out of the way so I have a clean copy of just the text up here. Down here I'm going to build my offset box. So I'm going to get rid of all of the original text. I have that other places. And then I can Control B to combine all of that. And now I have this nice full piece around it. So watch what happens when I want to put that box back around it. I can grab it all. I'm going to hold Control and unselect my reference circle because I don't need to copy it every time or move it around. But now I'm going to move this offset box I have, and from my move from point, I'm going to pick this center of this circle that I made so I have a reference. So now it looks, as you can see, when I move that around, you see the pointer is still up to the left. That's just like having this on a piece of paper and saying I want to grab it from this corner of the paper and match it up with this corner of the paper. So I can put it right back where I wanted it by pushing C for center snap and snapping it to the center of this reference circle up here. So now I can come in and I can trim all of this out and get rid of it. So I think I've got that right. Now I'm going to join that up. Yeah, so now I can look at it and see. I can also see that I have this island floating out here. Well, that's the center between Grandpa and Ted. So I'm just going to delete that. I don't need that. So now I've got this edited out to fit my text in. So now let me put my text in the middle of my circle and see what we get. So I'm going to select the text. I'm going to hit M. Again, it's going to ask me move from. So I'm going to use my same reference point. I've kept the circle with the text. Anytime I've moved anything around, I've kept a circle either by copying it or moving it. So I'm going to move from C center snap of this circle to the C center snap of this circle, and it'll pop my text right in there. So now I've made a record of Grandpa Ted, and from this point I can go in and bridge this together so that it won't fall out. So I'm going to W in node point. This time I'm going to get my add in there, 20, comma, negative 0.25, and hit enter. Now I can move that so it's still green. I'm going to hit M. Doesn't matter where I click. O for an orthogonal snap to keep it straight. And then like that, and it'll be over here far enough to hold up my text. So let's join that up and see. There, now Grandpa's dad will stay in there. We'll put a line, we'll hit M for midpoint, orthogonal. For a straight drop, we'll offset that an eighth. I'm going to show you something here that you may or may not already know. If I want to enter a fraction or a mixed number into the coordinate system, what I can do is type in that formula. You can also use parenthesis and put a relatively complex formula into the bar. So I'm going to O for offset, and I want to move, in this case, I want my tab to be 1/4 of an inch wide. So I'm going to move it over 1/8 of an inch each direction. So obviously I know that's 0.125, but when you get, if I wanted to move it over, 3/16 or 9/32, rather than come up with that decimal quickly in my head, it's a lot easier just to type the fraction. So if I want to move it over 1/8, I push 1/8, hit enter, pick a path and control to copy. So I'll hold control for the first one, let off, let it move the second one, and I can trim that out, and that will hold that steady. I think if I cut this out of material, it'll all be just fine. So thick enough material, I don't really want to connect the tops. I'll just let those hang. So hopefully that helps you see how to move using reference points and copy using reference points. Everything that you click on the first time is a reference. When you do move, copy, mirror, commands like that. So just play with the coordinate system and see how you can use it best to accomplish what you want to do. One brief bit I want to say about entering those formulas when you do a mixed number. So if I wanted a Q circle from here, and I wanted that circle to be 1 and, or let's say 4 13/16 diameter. So that would be 4, the whole number, and then plus the fraction, 13/16. So for a circle 4 13/16, you just enter the plus in between. So no space, just use 4 plus. For 1 3/8, it'd be 1 plus 3/8. So hopefully that's helpful, and we'll dig a little deeper into something else next time. Thanks.